Jake Thompson stood in his driveway at 7 in the morning, sipping coffee from his favorite mug. The sun was just starting to warm up the street, and he felt pretty good about life. After 25 years of working as a detective chief, dealing with criminals and paperwork, he'd finally bought his dream house in Maplewood Heights. Nice neighborhood, quiet streets, big trees everywhere. It seemed perfect. His wife Lisa came out carrying another box of old kitchen stuff they didn't need anymore. "Honey, where do you want the blender?" "The one your mom gave us that we've never used." Jake laughed. "Put it on the table with the price tag that says free to a good home. I'm not even going to pretend someone should pay for that thing." They'd been unpacking for 3 months now, and their garage looked like a storage unit exploded. Lisa had suggested the garage sale last week, and Jake jumped at the idea. Get rid of the clutter, meet some neighbors, maybe make a few bucks. Simple Saturday morning plan. By 8 o'clock, they had 3 folding tables set up with all kinds of stuff. Old books, kitchen gadgets, some tools Jake had doubles of, decorations that didn't fit their new place, and a bunch of random things that seemed important when you packed them, but useless when you unpacked them. You know how it goes. Their first customer was a nice older guy from down the street who bought a lamp for $5. Then a young couple came by and spent 20 minutes looking through the books. Everything was going smooth. Jake was actually enjoying himself, joking with Lisa about how they should have done this years ago. That's when he heard it. The sound of a car engine revving way too hard for a residential street on a Saturday morning. Jake looked up and saw a white SUV coming down the road like it was in a race. The vehicle jerked to a stop right in front of his house, tires squealing a little. The driver's side door flew open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she was dressed for a business meeting, not a weekend morning. She wore a cream-colored blazer, pressed pants, and heels that clicked on the pavement like a countdown timer. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob that didn't move even though she was walking fast, and her face had that pinched look some people get when they're always annoyed about something. She was carrying a clipboard. Never a good sign when someone shows up at your house with a clipboard. "Excuse me," she called out in a voice that could cut glass. "Are you the homeowner?" Jake set down his coffee mug and walked toward her with a friendly smile. 25 years as a cop taught you to stay calm no matter what. "Morning. Yes, I'm Jake Thompson. Just moved in about 3 months ago. Can I help you?" The woman didn't return the smile. She stopped a few feet away and looked at the garage sale setup like it was a crime scene. "I'm Barbara Whitmore, president of the Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association. And you, Mr. Thompson, are in direct violation of our community bylaws." Jake blinked. "Violation of what?" Barbara tapped her pen against the clipboard. Section 7, subsection 3. Paragraph 2 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that any garage sale, yard sale, or outdoor sale of personal property must be approved in writing by the HOA board at least 30 days in advance. "You have no such approval?" "Oh," Jake said, keeping his voice friendly. "I didn't know about that rule. We didn't get any HOA handbook when we moved in. The previous owners didn't mention." "Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse," Barbara cut him off. Her tone was the same one cops use when they've already decided you're guilty. "Every homeowner receives a complete copy of the bylaws at closing. If you claim you didn't receive one, that's between you and your real estate agent." Lisa walked over, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Hi there. I'm Lisa. Is there a problem?" Barbara gave her a look that would freeze water. "Yes, there's a problem. Your husband is operating an illegal garage sale." "Illegal?" Lisa laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Come on, it's just a garage sale. Half the neighborhood has them. With proper approval, yes. Without approval, no." Barbara made a note on her clipboard. "I'm issuing an immediate cease and desist order. You have 15 minutes to remove all items and dismantle this setup, or you'll face a fine of $500. Jake felt that familiar detective instinct kick in. Something was off here. He'd dealt with difficult people his whole career, but this was different. This woman wasn't just enforcing rules. She seemed to be enjoying this. "Listen, Barbara," Jake said calmly. "We obviously didn't mean to break any rules, but $500 seems pretty steep for a first-time mistake. Is there any way we could just get the proper approval and continue? We've already got people stopping by." "No." Barbara's answer was instant. The approval process requires a written application, a review period, and a board vote. The next board meeting isn't for 3 weeks. By then, your 30-day advance notice period would start over. Earliest you could have a garage sale would be 2 months from now. "That's ridiculous," Lisa said. She wasn't smiling anymore. Who makes rules like that? Barbara's eyes narrowed. The HOA board makes the rules, and homeowners follow them. That's how civilized communities work, Mrs. Thompson. Perhaps you should have considered whether you were suited for HOA living before purchasing in Maplewood Heights. Jake put a hand on Lisa's arm. He could feel her getting angry, and he didn't blame her. But he'd learned a long time ago that some battles you win by staying cool. Okay, Barbara. Could I at least see a copy of this bylaw you're citing? Section 7, subsection 3, you said. I don't carry copies of the bylaws with me, Barbara said, making another note. You can review them at the county recorder's office during business hours, Monday through Friday. But you're citing them to issue a fine, Jake pointed out. Don't you think I should be able to verify what you're telling me? Barbara's face hardened. Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Thompson? I'm asking to see the rule you're enforcing. That seems reasonable. What's unreasonable is you questioning my authority as HOA president. Barbara checked her watch. You now have 12 minutes to shut this down. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to call the police for trespassing and unauthorized commercial activity. Jake almost laughed at that one. Call the police on him. If only she knew who he was. But he kept that information to himself. Sometimes it's better to let people think they have the upper hand. All right, Jake said quietly. We'll pack up. Barbara looked surprised, like she'd expected more of a fight. Good. See that you do. And Mr. Thompson? Consider this your first and only warning. The HOA has standards. We expect all residents to maintain them. She turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. The engine roared to life, and she drove off just as aggressively as she'd arrived. Lisa stared after her, mouth open. What just happened? Jake picked up his coffee mug, but the coffee had gone cold. We just met the neighborhood bully. Can she really fine us $500 for a garage sale? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I'm going to find out. They spent the next 20 minutes apologizing to confused neighbors and packing everything back into the garage. Jake's mind was already working, though. He dealt with enough bad people to recognize the signs. Barbara Whitmore wasn't just enforcing rules. She was wielding power like a weapon, and in Jake's experience, people who did that usually had something to hide. As they carried the last box inside, Jake made a mental note to do some digging. Nothing official, just some basic research. Check the HOA bylaws. See what kind of organization they were really dealing with. He was a detective chief, after all. Research was kind of his thing. You okay? Lisa asked, noticing his quiet mood. Jake smiled at her. Yeah, just thinking. That woman rubbed me the wrong way. She rubbed me the wrong way, too, with sandpaper. Jake laughed and kissed his wife on the forehead. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. But as he said it, he was already planning his next move. Barbara Whitmore had just made a big mistake. She'd picked a fight with someone who investigated people for a living. And something told Jake that if he looked close enough, he'd find a lot more than just strict HOA enforcement. He was right about that. More right than he knew. Monday morning, Jake was sitting at his kitchen table reading the newspaper when Lisa came in holding an envelope. The look on her face told him it wasn't good news. It came in the mail, she said, tossing it on the table. From the HOA. Jake opened it and pulled out an official-looking letter on fancy letterhead. Notice of violation, it said in bold letters at the top. He scanned the contents and shook his head. According to Barbara Whitmore, their trash bins were in violation of Section 12, subsection 5. Apparently, garbage cans had to be completely hidden from street view at all times except on collection days. Our trash cans? Lisa leaned over his shoulder. They're right next to the garage door. That's where everyone keeps them. $250 fine if we don't move them within 48 hours, Jake read out loud. He got up and walked to the front window, looking at their trash bins. They were in the same spot they'd been since they moved in, the same spot where the previous owners kept them, judging by the oil stains on the concrete. He looked down the street. Every single house had trash cans visible. Some were beside garages, some were behind bushes. A couple were just sitting by the side of the house. None of them were completely hidden from street view. This is personal, Jake said quietly. What do you mean? She's targeting us specifically, look. He pointed out the window. The Hendersons have their cans right out front. The Davies have 3 bins just sitting in their driveway, but we're the ones getting the violation notice. Lisa crossed her arms. So what do we do? For now, we move the trash cans. Pick our battles. Jake folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. But I'm going to do some research tonight. That evening after dinner, Jake pulled out his laptop. He started with the county recorder's office website, looking up the HOA's official documents. The bylaws were there, all 63 pages of them. He made himself a fresh pot of coffee and started reading. 3 hours later, Lisa found him still at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed papers and sticky notes. "Find anything?" she asked. "Oh yeah," Jake said. "A lot of things, actually. Did you know Barbara Whitmore has been HOA president for 12 years? So, maybe people keep voting for her. That's the thing. According to these bylaws, elections are supposed to happen every 2 years. I searched the county records. There's only been one election. The first one, 12 years ago. Nothing since." Lisa sat down across from him. "That can't be legal. It's not. HOA board members are required by state law to hold regular elections. If they don't, homeowners can petition to remove them." Jake tapped his pen on the table. "But most people don't know that. They just assume the HOA knows what they're doing." "What else did you find?" Jake pulled up another document on his screen. "The HOA is supposed to file annual financial reports with the county. They haven't filed anything in 3 years. Also, there's supposed to be a reserve fund for community maintenance. According to the last financial statement that was filed, there's about $60,000 in that fund. But I drove around the neighborhood today. No maintenance is being done. The community park has broken equipment. The entrance sign is falling apart. The streetlights are out in 3 different places. Where's the money going? That's what I intend to find out." 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This time it was about Lisa's garden gnomes. She'd put 6 small ceramic gnomes in her flower bed because she thought they were cute. Barbara considered them unapproved decorative elements and demanded they be removed immediately. "Fine, $500, Lisa was furious. "Garden gnomes? Is she kidding me?" Jake looked at the notice. Same pattern. No mention of anyone else in the neighborhood having similar violations, even though he'd counted 8 other houses with lawn decorations during his drive around. He decided to attend the next HOA board meeting. According to the bylaws, meetings were held monthly and open to all homeowners. The next one was scheduled for Thursday evening. Jake marked it on his calendar. Thursday came and Jake put on a nice shirt, grabbed his notebook, and headed to the community center where meetings were supposedly held. When he got there at 7 o'clock, the place was dark and locked up. No meeting. No notice, nothing. He stood there for 20 minutes thinking maybe he'd gotten the time wrong. 3 other homeowners showed up equally confused. One of them was an older man named Walter who lived 2 streets over. "This happens every time," Walter said with a sigh. "They say they're having meetings, but nobody knows where or when they actually happen. How is that legal?" Jake asked. Walter shrugged. "I stopped trying to figure it out years ago. I just pay my dues and hope they leave me alone." One of the other homeowners, a woman named Patricia, spoke up quietly. "I heard they meet at Barbara's house. Just the board members. No public allowed." "That's definitely not legal," Jake said. "Good luck proving it," Patricia said. "Barbara has threatened to sue 3 different homeowners for harassment when they complained. Most people just give up." Jake drove home thinking hard. This wasn't just a strict HOA president. This was something bigger. The missing financial records, the secret meetings, the targeted harassment. His detective instincts were screaming that something criminal was going on. The next morning, Jake made some calls. He reached out to a buddy of his who worked in financial crimes. Just casual questions about HOA fraud, what to look for, how it usually worked. His friend told him about schemes where HOA board members embezzle funds, create fake vendor contracts, or even manipulate property values to benefit themselves. That conversation gave Jake some ideas. He started digging deeper, using public records and his law enforcement access to databases. He was careful to keep everything legitimate. No badge abuse, no illegal searches, just information that any citizen could access if they knew where to look. What he found made his blood run cold. Barbara's husband owned a property management company called Whitmore Property Solutions. That company had a contract with the Maplewood Heights. Sure, they were paid $15,000 a year to manage community affairs, but Jake couldn't find any evidence of what services they actually provided. The community center was barely maintained. The pool was cleaned by a separate company. The landscaping was done by another contractor. Then Jake found something even more interesting. In the past 3 years, 4 houses in Maplewood Heights had been sold well below market value. All 4 had been purchased by an LLC called Summit Holdings. Jake traced Summit Holdings through corporate records. It took some work, but eventually he found the connection. Summit Holdings was owned by a guy named Richard Whitmore, Barbara's brother-in-law. He sat back in his chair, pieces falling into place. It was a scheme. A really good one if you didn't know what to look for. Barbara harassed homeowners until they couldn't take it anymore and sold their houses cheap just to get away from her. Her brother-in-law's company bought them below market value. Then her husband's property management company rented them out, probably for a nice profit. Jake was putting together a timeline when another envelope arrived. Lisa brought it to him, and he could tell by her face it was bad. This one was worse than the others. Jake's work car, a plain sedan, had been parked in the driveway overnight instead of in the garage. Barbara claimed this was a commercial vehicle violation. Fine, $750. The letter also mentioned that if violations continued, the HOA would place a lien on their property. A lien meant they could eventually foreclose, take his house, force a sale. Now Jake understood the whole game. This was exactly how Barbara operated. Escalate the violations, increase the fines, threaten liens, make people desperate to sell, then swoop in with a lowball offer through the brother-in-law's LLC. Lisa looked at Jake with worry in her eyes.
Honey, this is getting serious.
Maybe we should just, play by her rules. Jake folded the letter slowly. No, he said quietly. Playing by her rules means letting her win, and she's been winning for too long. What are you going to do? Jake looked at his wife and gave her a small smile. What I do best. Build a case. He spent the rest of the weekend putting together a file. Every document he'd found, every connection he'd traced, every suspicious transaction. He printed financial records showing the missing HOA funds. He documented the pattern of forced sales and subsequent purchases by Summit Holdings. He made a timeline of Barbara's harassment of multiple homeowners. By Sunday night, he had a folder 3 inches thick. It wasn't complete yet, but it was a start, a very good start. Jake knew he had to be careful. Barbara had connections, money, and 12 years of getting away with this. She wouldn't go down easy. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd picked the wrong neighbor to bully. Jake closed the folder and put it in his home safe. Tomorrow he'd make some more calls. Reach out to the county prosecutor's office. Maybe the state attorney general. This was bigger than just his garage sale now. This was about justice for an entire neighborhood that had been living under Barbara's thumb for over a decade. As he locked the safe, Jake felt that familiar feeling he got when a case was breaking open. The pieces were there. Now he just had to put them together in a way that would stick. Barbara Whitmore had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how Jake wanted it. Jake spent Monday morning at the county courthouse sitting in the records department with a cup of terrible vending machine coffee. He'd taken a personal day from work, telling his captain he needed to handle some home stuff. Which was technically true. The clerk brought him another stack of documents. Property transfers, tax records, HOA filings. Jake had been there since they opened at 8, and it was now almost noon. His eyes were getting tired from reading legal documents, but he kept going. That's when he found it. The smoking gun, the HOAs. Financial statements from 3 years ago showed a payment of $45,000 for emergency roof repair on community center. Jake had driven past that community center a dozen times. The roof looked old and worn out, definitely not recently repaired. He made a note and kept digging. Another payment caught his eye. $30,000 for landscape renovation. But when Jake had talked to Walter, the older neighbor had mentioned that residents were complaining about the neglected landscaping. The entrance to the neighborhood looked shabby, not renovated. Jake added up the questionable payments. Over $100,000 in the past 3 years alone, all going to companies that either didn't exist or had suspicious connections to the Whitmore family. This wasn't just petty HOA tyranny anymore. This was straight-up theft. He thanked the clerk, made copies of everything, and headed home. On the way, he stopped at a sandwich shop and ran into Walter, the neighbor from the failed HOA meeting. "Hey, Jake," Walter said, looking tired. "How's the fight going with our favorite HOA president?" "Actually, Walter, can I ask you something?" Jake lowered his voice. "Have you noticed anything weird with the HOA finances? Like where the money goes. Walter glanced around the empty sandwich shop and leaned in. You asking as a concerned neighbor or as something else? Jake smiled. What makes you think I'm something else? I'm old, not stupid. I Googled you after we met. Detective Chief, right? 25 years on the force? Walter chuckled. Barbara picked the wrong house to mess with. Does anyone else know what I do? Not from me, but I'll tell you what I do know. My daughter's an accountant. I had her look at the HOA financial statements last year, the ones they're legally required to give us if we ask. She said the numbers didn't make sense. Money going out for services we never receive. It looked like embezzlement, she said, but she told me not to make waves. Said Barbara would make my life hell. Your daughter was right about the embezzlement, Jake said. I'm building a case, but I need to talk to other people Barbara's targeted, the ones who sold their houses. Do you know any of them? Walter thought for a moment. There's Tom Chen. He sold his place 2 years ago and moved across town. Nice guy. Barbara drove him crazy with violations. I think I still have his number. Could you give it to me? Walter pulled out his phone. Already texting it to you. Good luck, Jake. Somebody needs to stop that woman. That afternoon, Jake called Tom Chen. After explaining who he was and why he was calling, Tom agreed to meet him at a coffee shop the next day. Tom turned out to be a guy in his 30s. Worked as a software engineer, seemed pretty reasonable, but when he started talking about Barbara and the HOA, Jake could see the frustration still burning in his eyes. She made our lives miserable for 8 months, Tom said, stirring his coffee. It started with small stuff. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Our front door wreath was too large. Our car was parked facing the wrong direction in our own driveway. Every week, a new violation notice. New fine. How much did you end up paying? Jake asked. Over $4,000. And when we refused to pay more, she filed a lien against our house. We had a baby on the way, my wife was stressed out, and we just wanted it to end. So when we got an offer on the house, we took it. Let me guess. Below market value? Tom nodded. About $40,000 below what we should have gotten. But we were desperate. The company that bought it was called Summit Holdings. I looked them up later, couldn't find much about them. That's because they're owned by Barbara's brother-in-law, Jake said. It's a scheme. She targets homeowners, makes their lives hell, forces them to sell cheap, and her family buys the properties. Tom's face went pale, then red with anger. Are you serious? That's fraud. That's illegal, very illegal. And I'm building a case to prove it. Would you be willing to give a statement? On record? Absolutely. Whatever you need. Jake spent the next few days tracking down 2 more families who'd sold their homes. Same story with both of them. Harassment, escalating fines, threats of liens, lowball offers, quick sales just to escape. One couple had even filed a complaint with the county. But nothing had come of it because Barbara had good lawyers and the complaint wasn't detailed enough. By Thursday, Jake had statements from 4 different families, all documenting the same pattern of harassment and forced sales. Combined with the financial records showing embezzlement, he had the foundation of a solid case. That's when Barbara made her biggest mistake yet. Jake came home Friday evening to find Lisa sitting at the kitchen table crying. His stomach dropped. What happened? He knelt beside her chair. Lisa pushed a letter across the table. This came today, hand-delivered by Barbara herself. She knocked on the door, handed it to me, and said we had 24 hours to comply. Jake picked up the letter and felt his jaw tighten as he read it. According to this notice, their house was in violation of multiple accumulated offenses. The total fines now added up to $3,750. If not paid within 24 hours, the HOA would file for an emergency lien on their property and begin foreclosure proceedings. She smiled when she gave it to me, Lisa said, wiping her eyes. She actually smiled and said, I hope you've enjoyed living in Maplewood Heights because you won't be here much longer. Jake felt a cold anger settle over him. He'd dealt with criminals his whole career. Murderers, drug dealers, organized crime. But there was something especially infuriating about Barbara Whitmore. She was using the law itself as a weapon to bully and rob her neighbors. She hid behind bureaucracy and paperwork while destroying lives. That's it, Jake said quietly. No more waiting. What are you going to do? I'm going to end this tomorrow. Jake spent that evening making calls. First to the county prosecutor's office, where he had a contact in the white-collar crime division. He explained the situation and sent over his documentation. His contact promised to look at it first thing Monday morning and agreed that it looked like a solid case for fraud and embezzlement. Next, he called the state HOA Regulatory Board. Same thing, sent documents, got assurance they'd investigate. Then he did something he'd been holding off on. He called his captain and explained the whole situation. His captain listened, asked a few questions, and then said something that made Jake smile. You've been gathering evidence on your personal time, using only public records and legitimate interviews. You haven't identified yourself as law enforcement in any of these conversations. You've done everything by the book. If you want to move forward with this, you have my full support. Just remember, you're doing this as a citizen, not as a detective. Understood, sir. His captain paused. But between you and me, I hope you nail her. People like that give neighborhoods a bad name. Saturday morning, Jake woke up early. He made coffee, kissed Lisa, and told her not to worry. Then he opened his email and saw something that made his day. Barbara had scheduled an emergency HOA hearing for Thursday afternoon. The notice had gone out to just 3 people, Jake, Barbara, and the 2 board members. It was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Barbara's house. Perfect. Jake spent the weekend preparing. He made copies of everything, organized his evidence into a clear timeline, printed out financial statements, property records, statements from the 4 families, documentation of the fake elections, proof of the secret meetings. Everything. He put it all in a leather briefcase, the same one he used when testifying in court. Monday morning, he got confirmation from the prosecutor's office. They were opening an investigation. Tuesday, the state regulatory board sent him an email saying they were also investigating and would be contacting Barbara within the week. Wednesday night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about all the families Barbara had hurt. Tom and his pregnant wife, Walter too scared to fight back. All the people who'd paid unfair fines just to avoid her wrath. Tomorrow it would end. Thursday afternoon, Jake put on his best suit. The one he wore when making arrests on big cases. Lisa straightened his tie and looked at him with a mixture of worry and pride. You sure about this? She asked. Never been more sure of anything, Jake said. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. As he walked to his car, he saw neighbors watching from their windows. Word had gotten around somehow. People knew something was about to happen. Jake got in his car and started the engine. As he drove toward Barbara's house, he thought about what he was going to say, how he was going to present the evidence, how Barbara's smug face would change when she realized what was happening. For 12 years, Barbara Whitmore had been untouchable, a tyrant hiding behind HOA bylaws and legal threats. But she'd made one critical error in judgment. She'd thought Jake was just another neighbor she could bully. She was about to learn the difference between a victim and a detective chief who'd spent 25 years taking down criminals. Jake pulled up in front of Barbara's house at exactly 4 o'clock. He grabbed his briefcase, took a deep breath, and walked toward the front door. Game time. Barbara's house was exactly what Jake expected. Perfect lawn, perfectly trimmed hedges, perfectly painted shutters, everything in its place, everything controlled. Just like how she tried to run the neighborhood. He rang the doorbell and heard footsteps inside. Barbara opened the door wearing a business suit and that same pinched expression she always had. She looked him up and down, taking in his formal suit with what might have been surprise. Mr. Thompson. Punctual, at least. Come in. Jake followed her through a spotless hallway into a formal dining room. 2 people were already sitting at the table. A man in his 50s with a bald head and nervous expression, and a woman about Barbara's age wearing too much jewelry. They both had the same sharp features as Barbara. This is Gerald Whitmore and Diane Whitmore, Barbara said, not bothering to explain how they were related. The other board members. We constitute a quorum, so we can proceed with this hearing. Jake set his briefcase on the table and sat down. He didn't say anything, just looked at each of them calmly. 25 years of interrogations had taught him the power of silence. Barbara sat at the head of the table and opened a folder. Let's get started. Mr. Thompson, you have accumulated violations totaling $3,750 in fines. This is highly unusual for such a short residency period and indicates a pattern of deliberate disregard for community standards. Interesting way to put it, Jake said quietly. Barbara ignored him and continued. Your garage sale without approval. Trash bins visible from the street. unapproved decorative elements, commercial vehicle storage. Each violation was clearly documented and communicated to you. You've made no effort to comply or pay the assessed fines. Therefore, we have no choice but to place a lien on your property and begin foreclosure proceedings. She slid a document across the table. If you sign this agreement to sell your property voluntarily, we can waive half the fines. It would save you the embarrassment of a forced sale. I happen to know a buyer who might be interested even with your issues. Jake looked at the document but didn't touch it. Summit Holdings, I'm guessing? Barbara's eyes flickered just for a second. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. Summit Holdings, the LLC that's purchased 4 properties in this neighborhood over the past 3 years. All of them from homeowners you targeted with the same kind of harassment you've been giving me. Gerald shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Diane's jewelry clinked as she crossed her arms. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thompson, Barbara said, her voice dropping into a dangerous tone. Careful. We have lawyers. So do I, Jake said. But I don't think we'll need them. See, I'm not here to argue about trash cans or garden gnomes. I'm here to tell you that your scheme is over. Barbara laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. My scheme? I enforce HOA regulations. If you don't like it, you're free to move. In fact, I encourage it. That's exactly what you want, isn't it? For me to sell cheap and get out? Jake opened his briefcase slowly. But here's the thing, Barbara. I'm not like the other families you've bullied. I'm someone who knows how to investigate. Investigate what? Barbara was still trying to sound confident, but Jake could see the first crack in her armor. Jake pulled out a stack of papers. Let's start with the HOA finances. You haven't filed proper financial statements in 3 years. That's a violation of state law. The HOA is supposed to maintain reserves for community maintenance, but somehow $60,000 has disappeared with nothing to show for it. He slid the documents across the table. Gerald and Diane both looked at Barbara, who kept her eyes fixed on Jake. Then there's these payments, Jake continued, pulling out more papers.
$45,000 for emergency roof repair that never happened.
$30,000 for landscape renovation that doesn't exist. $20,000 for legal fees to a law firm that I can't find any record of. Want me to keep going? Those are private HOA matters, Barbara said, but her voice had lost its edge. Not when it's embezzlement. That's a crime. A felony, actually. Jake laid out another set of documents. Then we have the property sales. 4 families in 3 years, all harassed by you until they couldn't take it anymore. All sold below market value. All purchased by Summit Holdings. He pulled out a corporate filing document. Summit Holdings is owned by Richard Whitmore, your brother-in-law, the same Richard Whitmore who owns 3 rental properties in this neighborhood that were bought at suspiciously low prices. Diane stood up suddenly. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Diane, Jake said, his voice calm but commanding. Years of being in charge showed through. You're on the HOA board. You signed off on these financial statements. That makes you complicit. So yes, you do have to listen. Diane sat back down, looking pale. Barbara's hands were flat on the table now, knuckles white. Who do you think you are, coming into my house and making these accusations? That's a good question, Jake said. He pulled out his badge and set it on the table. I'm Detective Chief Jake Thompson. 25 years with the police department. 15 of those years in financial crimes and fraud investigation. And for the past 2 weeks, I've been building a case against you. The room went silent. Gerald made a small choking sound. Diane stared at the badge like it might bite her. Barbara's face had gone from confident to shocked to carefully blank. You're a cop? Detective Chief, Jake corrected. And before you try to claim I'm abusing my authority, let me be clear. Every single piece of evidence I collected was gathered on my personal time, using only public records that any citizen can access. I never identified myself as law enforcement during any interviews. I followed every rule, every procedure, every legal requirement. This investigation is clean. He pulled out more documents. I've already contacted the county prosecutor's office. They're opening a formal investigation into HOA fraud and embezzlement. I've also contacted the state HOA regulatory board. They're investigating the missing elections, the secret meetings, and the financial irregularities. And I've gathered statements from 4 families you've victimized, all willing to testify. Barbara's carefully maintained composure was cracking. This is harassment. You're targeting me because I enforced the rules. No, Jake said, his voice hard now. You targeted me because you thought I was just another victim you could push around. You made it personal when you came to my house. Smiled at my wife and told her we wouldn't be living here much longer. That was your mistake, Barbara. You picked a fight with someone who actually knows how to fight back. He stood up and started putting his documents back in his briefcase. Here's what's going to happen. The prosecutor will review my evidence. They'll probably want to interview Gerald and Diane here. If they're smart, they'll cooperate and testify against you. If not, they'll go down with you. You can't prove anything, Barbara said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. I can prove all of it. Bank records don't lie. Property transfers don't lie. Your own financial statements condemn you. Jake closed his briefcase with a sharp click. You've been stealing from your neighbors for years. You've been forcing families out of their homes so your family could profit. That's fraud, embezzlement, and probably a few other charges the prosecutor will come up with. Gerald suddenly spoke up, his voice shaking. I didn't know. I swear, I just signed what Barbara told me to sign. I didn't know she was stealing. Gerald, shut up, Barbara snapped. No, Gerald said, standing up. I'm not going to jail for you. I have grandkids. I'm out. He looked at Jake. I'll cooperate. I'll tell them everything. Diane stood up too. Me too. I'm done. Barbara watched them leave the room, her perfect control finally shattering. She turned back to Jake, and for the first time he saw real fear in her eyes. What do you want? She asked quietly. Justice, Jake said simply. For Tom Chen and his family. For Walter. For every person you bullied and every dollar you stole. You used the law as a weapon. Now the law is going to be used against you. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Barbara? About that lien you were going to file on my property? I wouldn't bother. By next week you won't have the authority to file anything. You'll be lucky if you're not in handcuffs. Jake walked out of Barbara's house and into the late afternoon sun. He could see neighbors watching from windows and porches. Word had spread fast. He nodded to a few of them as he walked to his car. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. How did it go? Jake smiled and typed back, It's over. She knows she's caught. As he drove home, Jake felt the satisfaction that came with closing a good case. Not the garage sale that started this whole thing, but something much bigger. A neighborhood freed from a bully. Families who might get justice. Money that might be recovered. Barbara Whitmore had ruled Maplewood Heights for 12 years. But she'd forgotten something important. Power built on fear and fraud doesn't last. And eventually, someone comes along who knows how to tear it down. Today, Jake had been that someone. The next morning, Jake woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages, missed calls, even a few emails. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through them while Lisa made coffee. Walter had texted, Everyone's talking about what happened yesterday. Is it true? Did you really take her down? Tom Chen had called twice and left a voicemail thanking him. 3 other neighbors had sent messages asking if the rumors were real. Jake smiled and showed Lisa his phone. Word travels fast in this neighborhood. So what happens now? Lisa asked, handing him a mug of coffee. Now we wait for the legal system to do its job. But things moved faster than Jake expected. By Monday afternoon, he got a call from his contact at the prosecutor's office. They'd reviewed his evidence over the weekend and were moving forward immediately. The case was strong enough that they'd already contacted Barbara's attorney. Tuesday morning, the state HOA regulatory board showed up at Barbara's house with a court order. They seized all HOA financial records, computer files, and documents. Jake watched from his living room window as they carried boxes out of her house. Barbara stood in her doorway, no longer looking powerful or intimidating. She just looked small and defeated. By Wednesday, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Jake refused to do any interviews, but other neighbors were happy to talk. They told stories about years of harassment, unfair fines, and the fear they'd lived under. Gerald and Diane, the other board members, had already given statements to the prosecutor. They claimed they didn't know about the embezzlement, that Barbara had controlled everything. Jake figured they were partly telling the truth. Barbara had been smart enough to keep the real dirty work to herself. Thursday afternoon, Jake got a call that made his day. The prosecutor wanted to file charges. Not just fraud and embezzlement, but also conspiracy, theft, and abuse of authority. If convicted, Barbara was looking at serious prison time. But what happened next was even better. Friday morning, Barbara's attorney contacted the prosecutor with a deal. Barbara would resign from the HOA immediately, pay full restitution to all affected homeowners, surrender all her family's properties purchased through Summit Holdings, and plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for probation instead of prison time. The prosecutor called Jake to get his opinion. "What do you think?" The prosecutor asked. "We could take her to trial, but this gets money back to the victims faster." Jake thought about Tom Chen and his family, forced to sell their home while his wife was pregnant. He thought about Walter, too scared to fight back for years. He thought about all the families who'd paid unfair fines just to survive. "Take the deal," Jake said, "but make sure the probation is long, at least 5 years, and she can never serve on any HOA board again." Already in the agreement, 5 years probation, full restitution, and a lifetime ban from HOA leadership positions. Then yeah, let's do it. The following week, everything happened at once. Barbara officially resigned as HOA president. Gerald and Diane resigned too, leaving the board empty. The state regulatory board appointed a temporary administrator to run things while the neighborhood organized proper elections. Summit Holdings was forced to sell all 4 properties they'd purchased. The families who'd been forced out got first option to buy them back at fair market value, with Barbara's restitution money covering the difference. Tom Chen and his family decided not to move back, but they got a check for $40,000. The money they'd lost. The HOA's stolen funds were recovered from various accounts linked to Barbara and her husband. $60,000 plus 3 years of fake payments. Over $150,000 total. It was divided among all the homeowners as refunds on their HOA dues. Jake got a check for $800. He donated it to the neighborhood community, Center for New Playground Equipment. Barbara's husband lost his property management contract with the HOA. His business took a major hit when other HOAs found out about the investigation. Last Jake heard, they were thinking about moving to another state to start over. Richard Whitmore, Barbara's brother-in-law, wasn't charged with any crimes. Apparently he could prove he didn't know about Barbara's scheme. But Summit Holdings was dissolved, and he lost a lot of money in the forced sale of the properties. 2 months after everything went down, the neighborhood held elections for a new HOA board. Walter ran for president and won easily. His first official act was to repeal half the ridiculous rules Barbara had created. Garden gnomes were now allowed. Trash cans could be visible. Garage sales just needed a simple 1-week notice, not 30 days of approval. The second thing Walter did was hire an independent accounting firm to manage the HOA finances. No more family members running things. No more secret contracts. Everything transparent and by the book. The neighborhood slowly came back to life. People started spending time in their yards again without fear of violation notices. Kids played in the street without worrying about noise complaints. The community center got renovated with the recovered funds. The entrance sign was fixed. Streetlights were repaired. It felt like the whole place could finally breathe again. 3 months after the confrontation at Barbara's house, Jake and Lisa decided to try something. On a Saturday morning in early fall, they set up tables in their driveway. Same spot as before, same folding tables, same boxes of random stuff they didn't need. But this time was different. By 8 in the morning, half the neighborhood had shown up, not to buy anything, just to hang out. Walter brought donuts. Tom Chen, who'd driven over from across town, brought coffee. Other neighbors brought chairs and coolers. It turned into a block party right there in Jake's driveway. "You know," Walter said, munching on a donut, "I've lived here 15 years. This is the first time I've actually enjoyed being in this neighborhood. Should have gotten rid of Barbara years ago," someone else said. "Nobody knew how," Tom added. "She seemed untouchable." Jake was flipping through a box of old books when a car pulled up. For a second, his heart jumped, thinking maybe Barbara was back. But it was just a young couple looking at houses in the neighborhood. They got out and walked over. "Is this a garage sale?" the woman asked. "Kind of," Lisa said with a laugh. "More like a neighborhood celebration." "We're thinking about buying a house here," the man said. "Is it a good neighborhood?" Everyone looked at Jake. He smiled and said, "It is now. Best neighbors you could ask for. Fair HOA, reasonable rules, good people. What about the HOA president? Are they difficult?" Walter laughed. "Our new president is a retired teacher who just wants everyone to get along. Nothing like the last one." The couple looked confused, but they smiled. "Sounds perfect." After they left, Lisa nudged Jake. "You didn't tell them the whole story." They'll hear about it eventually, Jake said. Right now, let them just see what this place really is. A good neighborhood with good people who look out for each other. By noon, Jake had sold maybe $20 worth of stuff, but he'd had a dozen great conversations, met neighbors he hadn't talked to before, and watched kids play in the street without anyone calling it a violation. That evening, after everyone had gone home and they were cleaning up, Lisa asked Jake if he regretted moving to Maplewood Heights. Are you kidding? Jake put his arm around her. This turned out to be the best decision we ever made, even with all the Barbara drama, especially because of the Barbara drama. Look what happened. A whole neighborhood is better now. Families got justice. People got their money back. And we made some real friends. Lisa leaned against him. My detective husband saving the day. Our detective husband, Jake corrected. You were with me through all of it. That night, Jake sat on his back porch with a beer looking at his yard. His garden gnomes were still there, right where Lisa had put them. His trash cans were beside the garage. His work car was in the driveway. All the things Barbara had tried to use against him. He thought about the past few months. How a simple garage sale had turned into taking down a criminal. How standing up to a bully had freed an entire neighborhood. How sometimes the right person ends up in the right place at exactly the right time. Jake had spent 25 years putting criminals behind bars. Murderers, drug dealers, white-collar frauds. But somehow this case felt different. More personal. More satisfying. He'd protected his home, his wife, his neighbors. And he'd done it the right way, following every rule, building a solid case that couldn't be challenged. His phone buzzed. A text from Walter. Thanks again for everything. You gave us our neighborhood back. Jake smiled and typed back. We gave ourselves our neighborhood back. I just helped start the process. And that was the truth. Barbara had counted on everyone being too scared or too tired to fight back. She'd ruled through fear and intimidation for 12 years. But all it took was one person willing to stand up, gather evidence, and do things the right way. Jake finished his beer and went inside. Lisa was already in bed reading a book. He climbed in next to her and she put the book down. Happy? She asked. Very happy. Think we'll have any more drama with the HOA? Jake laughed. With Walter in charge? The biggest drama will probably be deciding what color to paint the community center. Good, Lisa said, turning off the light. I've had enough excitement for 1 year, Jake agreed. He'd moved to Maplewood Heights looking for a quiet place to enjoy after years of chasing criminals. He'd gotten drama instead. But in the end, he'd gotten something better. A real home. In a real neighborhood. With real people who'd learned they didn't have to accept bullies just because they had titles and clipboards. And somewhere across town, Barbara Whitmore was learning that power built on fear doesn't last. And that karma sometimes wears a badge and knows how to build an airtight case. Jake smiled in the dark and went to sleep, finally feeling like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.